Hey guys, so this is my dog Chaco. Chaco, say hi. He's too excited to be walking. Uh, yeah, so I want to do something a little different for these poker vlog intros and outros. The sitting in my room, I feel like a little stagnant and boring. At least with this kind of an intro, you guys get to see some nature, the neighborhood, and get to know me a little bit more about the things I like to do, who I am as a person maybe. I don't think a poker vlog has to only just be about poker. A vlog is a vlog. It's a video log of my life, right? So here I am. This session, episode 5, it takes place on May 31st at the Lake Elsinore Casino. I play the 2-3 game. That's usually the game I like to play. I buy it for $300, which is the max. And it starts off a little slow, short-handed, but the session picks up a little bit towards the middle. I get a very good sized bluff off with complete air. You guys will see that. And I make a laydown that, theoretically isn't the best every time, but in this session it works out for me pretty well. You guys will get to see all that if you stay tuned and watch. So I hope you guys enjoy it. Let's go. Alright guys, so in the first interesting hand of this session, I look down at ace jack of diamonds. There's a straddle, there's a under the gun +1 call, and I'm gonna make it 25 bucks to go here. I like my hand, it's pretty strong. I think I don't mind playing this multi-way, especially if some diamonds come on the flop, but it ends up being a little bit more multi-way than I like. The small blind player makes the call, the big blind player makes a call, and the under the gun +1 player makes the call. The flop comes out, it's 3-7-9 rainbow. There's one diamond, and everybody checks it over to me. I think this would have been a good time to bet, but I end up just checking. If 8 or a 10 comes out, I'm going to have a straight draw. If another diamond comes out, I'm going to have a diamond draw. And I also just have 2 overs to the board. So realistically, this would have been a great time to bet, but I end up just checking like I said. And I regret it big time when the 2 of diamonds comes out on the turn. The small blind player makes a raise to 60 bucks. And the big blind player actually says, heck no, I'm going to make it 150 to go. The under the gun +1 player folds here. And I think about it for a little bit. I end up just kind of folding here because I don't want to call off my whole stack. But hindsight's always 2020. I think about it a little bit more and just kind of recognize that these 2 players are both very aggressive. Um, I'm blocking the Jack 10 of diamonds kind of a draw, but there's always going to be 8-10 drawing hands like that. There could be lower pairs that if I just hit an ace or a jack, I'm going to be good. But I end up just folding and watch out the rest of this hand because I'm a little bit curious to see what does come on the river. The small blind makes the call for 150, and I regret my whole decision when the king of diamonds comes out on the river. I would have ended up hitting the nuts on this board, and both players actually end up just checking here. The big blind player who raised to 150 says that he has total air. I think he shows Jack 10 at this point for a missed gut shot. And the small blind player shows 4-7 of diamonds. So he had a flush draw and a pair on the flop and the turn. So I think he would have been able to ship me a nice sized pot if I ended up just pretending like I had ace king here at the end. But at the end of the day, I only had $25 invested in this pot. I think the biggest mistake here was not making a bet on the flop. It definitely would have been called by the small blind at least, and maybe even the big blind. But that being said, I would have had the flush draw on the turn where I could have kept barreling and eventually make my hand on the river. It doesn't always work out this way, but I think I went the safe or tight route during this hand and regretted it a little bit. But like I said, hindsight is 2020, and you can't always base your decisions off hindsight. So I decided to wait for a better spot during this hand, and I think one comes up just a couple hands later, and you guys will see that in the next clip here. So in this next hand, the under the gun +1 player limps for $3. The middle position player raises to 15. I'm gonna go ahead and make the call here. I think a 3 bet would have been okay, but the under the gun +1 player also makes the call. And we're gonna head three ways to the flop now, which comes pretty good for me. It comes ace, king, eight with the ace of king of diamonds. So I flopped the gutter to a royal flush here. I'm definitely just going to check over to my opponents. The under the gun +1 player also checks, and the middle position player puts out a bet of 15 bucks. I definitely want to get some more money in the pot here at this point. I make it 50 bucks to go here, and the under the gun +1 player and the middle position player both fold out pretty quickly. Pretty sad to see them fold so fast, but it's always nice to scoop up a pot with no pair and just a double draw. So I make a profit of 48 bucks here. I stack up my chips real quick and move on to the next hand. So we're a little short-handed at this point, and the action folds over to me. I make it 15 bucks to go after looking down at ace 9 suited. The player in the cutoff calls, the button player calls, the small blind player makes the call, and the big blind player also makes the call. So we're headed five ways to a flop. There's $75 in the pot, and I like the flop a lot. It comes ace 3 jack rainbow. I think most people aren't going to have a better ace than me at this point, especially when it checks over to me. I want to get value out of hands like somebody holding a jack or maybe with a Broadway draw, so I bet 20 bucks here. The cutoff player calls and the big blind player calls. We go to a turn, it's a seven of hearts. I don't like the flush draw. I think there's a good chance that someone is going to have a Broadway draw, or maybe they're trying to hit a set here or a two pair. So I make it 75 bucks to go. I really want to fold out all of the weaker hands. And if someone does have an ace, they're going to let me know by calling. So when I make this bet, the cutoff player and the big blind player, they both fold, and I'm going to take down a pot with a nice profit of $110. I think in this situation, if someone does have a better ace than me, like an ace 10 or an ace queen, they probably would have let me know pre-flop, especially given how short-handed we were. I could really be raising to 15 bucks with anything, but given the way that the hand played out, I think it's very likely that I got a hand like king jack to fold out, or a hand like a flush draw, or even a Broadway draw. So I could have maybe got value from these hands, but it's always good to just take down a pot when you're ahead, and that's what we do here. So we'll move on to the next hand now. So in this next hand, there's a straddle to 6 bucks. The middle position and the hijack player both make the call, and I definitely want to show some aggression at this point. The last hand prior to this, when I'm on the button, I fold out pocket fives to a pretty large raise pre-flop from a player in the straddle position. He got lucky and got a straddle twice because someone had missed their blind. So I look down at 7-9 suited, and I make it 26 bucks to go here. It's a great spot to be in position against everybody and get some money in the pot, and 26 bucks is a good size raise to where I could rep a strong hand. So we head four ways to a flop. The flop comes out ace 3 5. There's one spade. It gives me a little bit of heart. I know that if a 4 and a 6 come, I could make a straight here, or even a 6 and an 8. So when the action checks over to me, I think I'm going to try to rep this ace here. I make it $55 to go, and pretty much everybody folds out quickly here except for the hijack player. Me and him were pretty friendly and talking, having a good time before this hand. I know he's a good player and he pays attention to bet sizes. So when the king of spades comes on the turn and he checks here, I'm going to try and rep a hand like ace king. I make a move. I go all in here with just a spade draw, 9 high, and the hijack player takes his time for a little while. I think he's really studying me, thinking about the bet sizes, but he ends up making the fold here. And because of the last hand, I just want to show the players at this table I came to play and I'm capable of bluffing. So I end up showing my cards here. The player who made the raise against my pocket fives, he and I end up kind of talking about it, laughing about it, and he says that he had a pretty strong hand, but he just definitely didn't like the sizing of my bets here. The player who's in the hijack really doesn't like it, and when the player in seat 9 leaves, he actually takes his spot to try and get some position on me and catch me later on. So at this point, I know I've got to tighten up a little bit, wait till I have a strong hand, and make some similar sized bets that'll end up getting paid off.
But for now, I make a profit of $138 with 9 high. It's a great feeling, and we're going to move on to the next hand now. So a couple rotations later, the table is full now, and I look down at Jack 10 suited under the gun. It's a strong hand, but I definitely don't want to raise and get 3-bet here, so I limp in. The under the gun +1 limps in as well, and the middle position makes it 15 bucks to go here. The small blind player calls and the big blind player calls. With suited Broadway cards, I could be putting in a 3-bet here, especially with the amount of players coming in, but considering I have more of a drawing hand at this point, I think I just want to call and get as many people in this pot as I can. I definitely regret this when the flop comes out Jack Ace Jack with 2 hearts. The small blind and the big blind player check. I decide to check here to disguise the strength of my hand. It works pretty well. The under the gun +1 player makes a bet of $35. The middle position player also calls that $35, and the small blind player makes a call for $35. Considering how many draws are on this board with all the Broadway hands that are going to be calling or making bets here and the hearts that are on the board, I definitely want to put some more money in the pot. I make it $135 to go. Kind of gives anyone with a flush draw 3 to 1 to call here, even though it's a paired board. But the under the gun +1 player folds pretty quickly, and so does the middle position player. The small blind player goes in the tank for quite a while at this point. It scares me a little bit because it makes me wonder if he's got a hand like Queen Jack or King Jack that he's thinking about how to extract value from me. But he really just takes his time before ended up and making the fold here. And he ends up telling me that he folded an ace at this point, which makes me curious as to what the other two players had. If all of the aces were already out, I shouldn't really have to be too worried about another player making a stronger hand than me. Or if the player in the middle position was maybe calling with a hand like King Queen of Hearts or King 10 of Hearts. Either way, though, I'm going to take down this pot. I show the jack just to give myself a little bit of credibility after the last hand, and I make a profit of $165 in this hand. This hand gets a little bit confusing for some of the other players at the table. There's an undergun straddle to $6. The cutoff player makes the call, and the player on the button also makes the call. I see that the player who straddled did it with a $25 chip, so when I look down at King Jack offsuit from the big blind, I decide to just make it easy for him and make it $25 to go. He doesn't have that strong of a hand, so he just ends up making the fold here, and the player in the cutoff position decides to make the call. The player on the button is pretty confused on what exactly just happened. There's a lot of chip shuffling, so once he figures it out, he just decides to also make the call. And we're going to head 3 ways to a flop out of position. Not my favorite place to be again, but I still think I'm going to have the best hand a lot of the time. And when the ace king 7 rainbow board comes out, I just decided to check here. I'm hoping that if someone does have an ace, they'll let us know by betting. When nobody makes a bet, the turn comes out. It's the 10 of clubs. I now have a Broadway draw with second pair and a pretty good kicker. So I think it's time to get a little bit of value in the pot. I put out a bet of $24. And the player in the cutoff position, he decides to make a move here. He makes it $100 to go at this point. And the player in the button, he doesn't seem to have a strong hand here. He just ends up folding. And I got to make a decision at this point of whether I think this guy's bluffing or if he's making a move like this with a hand like 2 pair or just a really strong combo draw. And to be honest, at this exact moment at the table, I really do feel like he has a weak hand, like a combo draw, or maybe just a weak king, or at best he's gonna have a hand like King 10 or King 7. But I eventually just decided to make the fold here because at the end of the day, I really only have about 50 bucks invested in this pot, and it just doesn't seem like the best spot to call off, especially with the other player having position on me. He shows me that he really liked my 7-9 of spades hand and decided to make a similar move. He had 8-9 of clubs, which ends up being an open-ended straight draw and a club draw on the turn. So when he shows this hand, I say nice hand to him. It's a good move, it's a good bet. And the dealer is nice enough to actually show us a jack on the river. So my opponent would have made a straight, and it would have been pretty hard to actually get away from two pair at this point for an all-in size bet with, probably over $400 in the pot, getting 4-1. So it may not have been the best decision every time, but in this exact situation, it worked out pretty well for me. So a couple rotations later, I look down at King Jack offsuit. I think it's time for some redemption with this hand. I make it 15 bucks to go under the gun. And the player in the hijack makes the call. He's the player from the 7-9 suited hands. And the player in the small blind and the big blind also make the call here. So we're headed four ways to a flop, which comes pretty nice. It comes King Jack 8 rainbow. And the small blind and big blind check over to me. I want to get a little bit of value in this pot from, maybe a weaker king or a weaker jack. So I make it 15 bucks to go. All of the action just decides to fold, and just the big blind makes the call. So we're headed heads up to a turn, which comes the ace of spades. It's not a great card because now hands like Queen 10 get there, but it's not the most likely that he's going to have a hand like that. So I want to get a little bit more value in the pot. I make it another 20 bucks to go here. And when the 9 of hearts comes out on the river, it doesn't change much. But I'm still a little bit worried that my opponent could be trapping. So when he checks it over to me, I make a small bet of $30 and I flip over the King Jack offsuit. I think I could have definitely bet more here, but my opponent tells me he had a really weak king and he was just calling off at this point in case I was bluffing. So I feel pretty good about the fact that I was still able to get value out of a much weaker hand. Maybe I could have gotten a little bit more, but I don't think I got greedy at this point and just took what I could get. So I make a profit of $110 in this hand and move on to the next one. It's getting close to the end of my session here, and I see a very new to the game player sit down. Maybe he has experience playing online, but it's pretty obvious to me and to the rest of the table that he's new to the casino world, as the dealer has to kind of walk him through how to go about the previous hand. So when I see him raise to $15 in the hijack, I think it's a good time to try and isolate in position with ace 9 offsuit. I'm going to apologize because I don't show my hand to the camera here, but that is what I had, and I thought it was a good time to make a move. I'm pretty excited until I see a raise from the button to $185 here, and yeah, it's not a great spot for me. I definitely get caught with my hand in the cookie jar again, and the player in the hijack position, it's kind of obvious that he doesn't really know what he's doing. He's holding his chips. He's already announced that he wants to call, but he's trying to figure out how exactly to count these chips out. And it's good for me because it gives me a little bit of time to save face, shuffle chips, and just end up folding here. So I'm only showing this hand just to show kind of the thought process that I have at the table a little bit. When there's easier players to your right, you definitely want to try to isolate them and 3-bet. But I end up not really being able to do much with this. I'm going to show the board run out anyways, just for the fun of it. And my opponent that 3-bet ends up having pocket queens. The player in the hijack position has ace jack offsuit. And the board runs out 10 deuce 5 on the flop, a 10 on the turn, and an 8 of diamonds on the river. It's a hand that I would have clearly lost to both players. But I think given the board texture, if I did get heads up with the opponent in the hijack and the player on the button did not have pocket queens, I think I would have been able to make a couple bets that would have gotten the player off of ace jack and let me take down a nice sized pot with no pair. In the final hand of this session, I call the straddle in the hijack position. The player in the cutoff also makes the call here. And the player in the small blind makes a raise to $26. He's a 5-5 player that just came from a broken game. So when he makes this raise, I look down at ace 9 offsuit. And I think it's going to be a great position for me to call here. I have position on this player, and it's likely that he's doing this raise with a much weaker holding than the standard raise size for this game. So I go ahead and make the call. We go to the flop heads up, and the flop comes out ace 6 deuce with 2 diamonds. but when he makes a bet of $20 on the flop, I think he's gonna end up having a drawing type of a hand, you know, some kind of a gut shot straight draw or some kind of a diamond draw. So I want to get a little bit more value in the pot before the board gets scary. I make a raise to 55 bucks here, and the small blind player doesn't take too long before just making the call here. It's not a huge raise. There's a good amount of money in the pot. So he makes the call, and we go to a turn, which comes the Queen of Diamonds. It's not my favorite card to see, but when the small blind player checks over to me, I think he could be trying to trap me at this point with the weak flush. So I just go ahead and check as well for some pot control. And we go to a river, which comes the Eight of Hearts. It's a pretty blank card at this point. The small blind player checks again. I definitely think I could have made a bet at this point, but I just go ahead and show my hand. It's the end of the session. I'm feeling pretty chill and just don't really want to get bluffed off of a hand if he does decide to try and make a race here with maybe a king of diamonds in his hand or something. So I go ahead and take down a profit of $116 and rack up to get on out of here.
Hey guys, here's Chaco again. We are still walking. He's sniffing a bush. Come on. I hope you guys liked the video. I definitely mentioned that I got a big bluff off with the 7-9 of spades hand. It was pretty epic. My heart was pounding in the moment. The player was very good, and I'm glad he didn't sniff it out, because that would have hurt the session quite a bit. You know, altogether I had a lot of fun during this session. I make a profit of $327 after playing for roughly 4 hours. So it's always good to make a profit, have fun, meet new people, and all that occurred during this session. So I'm kind of curious if you guys like the idea of me, you know, just kind of filming random parts of my life, whether it's me walking my dog or, you know, the drive to the casino. Whatever you guys want to actually see, let me know, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Bye.